kids will say, hey, I'm a conservative, I'm a libertarian, I believe in certain things, but I'm afraid of saying it in class. Should I say it in class or not? I say, well, are you willing to get the bad grade? What they're asking is, how do I do what I want to do without paying a price? You can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Everything has a cost.
I suspect I know your answer to this, but do you think these things should be fought on multiple fronts? Meaning,
Yeah.
there can be a more conservative answer, there can be a more libertarian answer that's more free market. I mean, that's why I started Locals. It was like,
Yeah.
when I've had this disagreement with Tucker Carlson on his show where he wants the government to do it, and I said, well, I'm going to try the free market side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that argument because it's like, maybe we all have to hit it in different ways. Look, the PragerU guys that you work with, they got into a lawsuit with YouTube.
Yeah.
Is Dennis's, or I don't want to speak for Dennis, but is the PragerU ethos like, let's use the law to stop companies from doing something? Of course not, but we're all trying to navigate very murky waters.
And isn't that the freest market of all, is to try all of these different solutions to the problem? You're not going to be able to take down this monstrous left-wing edifice with one little narrow pure solution. That one little narrow pure solution might help, but you're going to need a lot of different strategies, a lot of different tactics to undertake. And so certainly everything should be on the table. You don't want to do anything that is objectively wrong. I'm not advocating that in any way. But if one strategy...
You mean we shouldn't just burn down the Google servers? I think they're somewhere in Utah. We shouldn't just go there and
light them
put
on
masks
fire in the name
on
of social justice.
Yeah,
no, we probably shouldn't do that.
Okay.
But certainly, I mean, what you've done with Locals is a great example, right? Certainly we can innovate, we can try to create our own institutions, at least create the beginnings of our own institutions, and enforce the law that is already on the books. Those two things are not contradictory to one another, and actually, if we do enforce the law, if we do have a credible threat of enforcing the law, if we do have a credible threat of a competitor to one of these organizations, that is going to increase the likelihood of success on all fronts. You know, when you've got something like a Google, and when you add in all the other tech companies, they control the flow of internet. That is an amount of power that I don't think anybody who cares deeply about the country or any of the founding fathers or any of the people who've thought about how this republic is supposed to work, I don't think they would be comfortable with that kind of power being consolidated, whether it's in technically a private company or not.
Yeah. Does some of your belief that these things can be stopped, is there a biblical sort of bedrock beneath that? I mean, I always say if David could be Goliath, then maybe Dave could be Google. Like, I really do believe that
Right.
there is, it is so embedded in us that the little guy can beat the big guy, that makes me crazy enough to try to start my own tech company in the midst of all this. You know?
That's such a great point, because I don't know that they can be beaten. I don't know that the destructive left that has wrecked our institutions and our political traditions and our civil society, I don't know that they can be beaten or beaten in my lifetime. But I do know I should try, and I do know I have no reason not to try. I mean, I guess that would be maybe the biblical basis of it is, what do I have to lose? What would I gain by playing along and saying things that I don't believe in and being bullied into posting whatever I've got to post on social media? If I lose my integrity, if I lose my dignity, if I lose the things that I care about, so I have a slightly more pleasant life, that's not a compelling argument to me.
Well, I think a lot of people watching this would say, well, I don't want to lose my job.
Yeah, and it's a real fear. I mean, I'm sure you get this question all the time at college campuses. Kids will say, hey, I'm a conservative, I'm a libertarian, I believe in certain things, but I'm afraid of saying it in class. Should I say it in class or not? I say, well, are you willing to get the bad grade? What they're asking is, how do I do what I want to do without paying a price? You can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Everything has a cost. For me, I've spoken out, I've said what I believe. It has cost me certain things. I go to bed at night, I'm grinning ear to ear, I sleep like a baby. I think probably you do too.
Yeah.
It's worth it to me, but there is a cost to that.
It's interesting because I get that question all the time, or at least when we were allowed to travel to
Right.
colleges. Remember the old
Yeah,
days?
right.
And I had once heard Ben Shapiro, obviously, give an answer on that, which was that if you're in college, that in your core classes, So meaning if you want to be a doctor, in your core classes, you probably shouldn't speak up because you do need to move ahead and you don't want to be screwed. But in some of your other stuff, you know, like lesbian dance theory, like there you maybe could speak up a little bit more because it probably won't take you out. There was some version of that. I'm not totally sure if that's what he feels now. And for like 4 or 5 years ago, what I would say is just suck it up and get the grade because you want to get out. But about 4 years ago, I completely changed and I started saying the absolute reverse. You must speak up. If you don't speak up, if you're in college, the world will never be easier for you. You're not going to get out of college. You're not going to get out of college and have a car payment and a mortgage and a wife and a dog and all of these responsibilities plus all the endless nonsense of the world and suddenly be like, you know, I'm going to get brave today. Like
Time to lose my job.
Let's roll. So you'll never do it. So that's what I push now. But it doesn't mean it's easy. It means it's the reverse.
This is the same argument as don't worry about the snowflakes when they get to the real world. No, the real world gets realer and realer and realer. And I understand prudence is a virtue and politics changes with time. Politics is about circumstances. So maybe it made more sense at one time to keep a little bit quiet and then you can try to move here. But in terms of how I would live my life or the advice I would give, no, I would say speak up. Doesn't mean you need to go wear your MAGA hat every time you're at the water cooler, but it does mean if you're asked a question about your beliefs, I would tell people what you think. I think it's a good habit to get into. Let's not forget the virtues are habits, and so if you practice them from a young age, you're more likely to be able to practice them at an older age.
Right.
And if you don't, if you say no, when I turn 60, then I'm going to start practicing the virtues. I don't know if it's going to work.
And the scarier part is that I think a lot of young people think, oh, it's when I turn 22.
Yeah.
Right? Like 60, we can all accept that a 60-year-old most likely, you know, although maybe he's going through like a later midlife crisis and then maybe is going to do something nuts, but that probably involves going to Vegas and, you know,
not practicing the virtues.
Not right. It's not right. You don't have right. You're not going to go the virtue thing. Right. I'm curious. You sort of hit on this, but I'm curious what you think the sort of future, how wide a future conservative tent can be. Because I'll drop a little knowledge for you, Knowles. I'm already working on my second book, and that's kind of the direction I'm going to go with it. That what I'm really, it seems to me that the right, broadly speaking, has won the big arguments. They've won the arguments on individual liberty. They've won the arguments on family. On belief, at least in the terms of as an organizer of society, maybe not at an absolute individual level. I think we have a little disagreement on that, which I'm happy to talk about. But that the right basically got the big stuff right. And what I think is for someone that's on the more liberal side of that, my job is to kind of make sure that they never go off the deep end too far right, let's say. And start coming around to like, you know, trying to get violence out of video games again, like the right used to try to do. But I know that there's people on the right that, you know, want more of a religious version of conservatism. Then there's obviously the libertarians. What do you think that thing can hold? Because I really believe that the future of Western politics, not just in America, in every Western nation, is a center-right future. I think we're seeing that happen across the world right now.
Yes.
But how wide do you think that thing can be to not to become too big?
I think you don't need to worry as much about the breadth as the object, what you're fighting against, because I do think that there is a lot of space on the right, but it's not going to be the same tent that we saw in the Cold War, for instance. So you will never find a greater admirer of William F. Buckley Jr. and Ronald Reagan than me. Okay, I really admire those guys. They fought their battle. They were fighting the Soviet Union, and they cobbled together this coalition that doesn't make a lot of sense. The coalition was the social conservative, traditionalist, religious right, and they hated the atheism of the Soviet Union. You've got the libertarians, practical anarcho-capitalists on one side, right? They don't really care about the religious right argument at all, but they hate the collectivism of the Soviet Union. You've got the blue dog Democrats. They don't really care about either of those two things. They care about the imperial expansion of the Soviet Union. They come together, they fight the Cold War.
Where do you think Reagan fits in that? He's more of like a California conservative that kind of shifted right in the midst of all that, right?
Anybody who tells you they can analyze Ronald Reagan is lying to you. Ronald Reagan is one of the most enigmatic figures in American politics. I mean, this is a guy, he liberalized abortion laws in California more than anybody before him, and yet he becomes one of the most pro-life presidents in American history. It's very, I mean, I know that Bill Buckley had a major influence on bringing Ronald Reagan over to the right. I mean, I think there were a lot of people of his generation who said they got mugged by reality, and I think that's how you go from a New Deal Democrat into a Reaganite conservative.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.